Thank you for waiting this long and for tuning in to this one. If you're a first time viewer, I am talking to myself, and this is Talking to Myself Gaming, the podcast where I talk to myself about my obsessive thoughts, and maybe you can learn something from it. I'm going to try something a little different today. On April 7th of 2023, was published a research article titled "Lonely Individuals Process the World in Idiosyncratic Ways" that was posted to I'm reading it through journals.sagepub.com, their psychological science section. I don't know where this was originally published. I'm not interested in that. I'll send a link to how I found it and the article describing it in the comments. I guess I won't send it to you. I will post it in the comments, is what people say. Or no, the description is where I should put it. Maybe I'll put it in both. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this article to you. And I am going to comment on it from my perspective as a lonely person and an idiosyncratic thinker. And maybe the researchers can learn something as well. So from the top, lonely individuals process the world in idiosyncratic ways. Authors are Eliza C. Beck, I believe that's how that's pronounced. That's spelled B-A-E-K. Ryan Hyen, Carolyn Parkinson are the three that are listed here at the top. There are many that are listed at the bottom, and we'll go through their biographies and their organizations at the end, because I'm not interested in them at all. Abstract. Loneliness is detrimental to well-being and is often accompanied by self-reported feelings of not being understood by other people. What contributes to such feelings in lonely people? We used functional MRI of 66 first-year university students to unobtrusively measure the relative alignment of people's mental processing of naturalistic stimuli and tested whether lonely people actually process the world in idiosyncratic ways. Now, if you're like me until about six months ago, you don't know what the word idiosyncratic means, and they're going to use idiosyncratic and idiosyncrasy throughout this article, and the only way that I have been able to understand idiosyncratic is with the etymology, and I'm not going to pretend that I speak whether this is Greek, it looks Greek to me, or Latin. I'm not going to pretend to know the difference, but basically I think it's Greek, because basically what the word means is with an individual, like in an individual way. So an idiosyncrasy effectively means unique to you or unique to an individual thing. So if I am an idiosyncratic thinker, that means that I think, and that means that I process information in a way that is unique to me. So I'm going to read that sentence again. We, the authors, used functional MRI of 66 first-year university students to unobtrusively measure the relative alignment of people's mental processing of naturalistic stimuli and tested whether lonely people actually process the world in idiosyncratic ways. Okay, so what they're saying here is when they say they want to unobtrusively measure the relative alignment of people's mental processing of naturalistic stimuli, when they say the mental processing of naturalistic stimuli, all they're saying is that they want to know how people respond in a double-blinded environment to things that will happen in a natural environment. And to be double-blinded means that I believe that the double blind means that the person being tested doesn't know what exactly they're being tested for, and the tester can't observe the test as it's happening. I could be wrong about that. Somebody define double blind for me, because I'm moving on. Continuing to quote, we, the authors, found evidence for such idiosyncrasy, lonely individuals, plural, neural responses were dissimilar to those of their peers, particularly in regions of the default mode network in which similar responses have been associated with shared perspectives and subjective understanding. Okay, so I don't love it when articles try to say a simple thing using complex language, like to prove that they're intelligent. But when they say lonely individuals' neural responses were dissimilar to those of their peers, that's pretty simple. Neural is just your brain response. Because they can't measure your consciousness. They can't measure whether when you're responding to a neural stimulus, they can't measure whether you're thinking in language or whether you're thinking in pictures or whether you're thinking in emotion, but they can measure with the functional MRI, they can measure whether there is brain activity. And so that's what they're talking about when they say that lonely individuals' neural responses were dissimilar to those of their peers, particularly in regions of the default mode network in which similar responses have been associated with shared perspectives and subjective understanding. Okay, so the shared perspectives and subjective understanding means that they don't have studies under functional MRI of how a broad class of people respond to naturalistic stimuli. That means that they haven't double-blinded and done functional MRI tests of normal people to get a baseline. But with the studies that have been done, similar responses, and the stories that we tell among ourselves, the shared perspectives, and then subjective understanding is what the actual participants, not the actual participants, but the actual experimenters, the scientists in the study, what they individually understood to be true about normal people and how normal people process the world. Moving forward, quote, these relationships persisted when we controlled for demographic similarities, objective social isolation, and individuals' friendships with each other, end quote. Again, this is how this is going to go. So what they're talking about here is they say that the relationship to a lonely person's response being idiosyncratic persisted. They continued to notice it after they were able to take away in the studies that they did have people who lived in similar situations that they did, came from similar racial and ethnic backgrounds that they did, and economic backgrounds is what I meant to say, because where you're from is actually your ethnicity. So similar ethnic, racial, and economic backgrounds. Objective social isolation means that they probably, just from the abstract, they probably sat down and they actually did a therapy session with the people that they studied who were able to, in effect, prove that they are socially isolated. And then they were able to observe this among the isolated's friendships with other isolated people. Continuing. Quote, the researchers' findings raise the possibility that being surrounded by people who see the world differently from oneself, even if one is friends with them, may be a risk factor for loneliness. That's the end quote of the abstract. And now we're going to move into the paper itself. And so basically, to sum all that up, what they're saying is that they found a statistically relevant correlation between being socially isolated and thinking idiosyncratically, and they found a feedback loop of thinking idiosyncratically leading one to feel isolated and isolate oneself, leading one to be isolated and to have an idiosyncratic way of thinking. So it's a loneliness and isolation are a feedback loop, is what this article is saying. And so the reason that I'm wanting to do this, now that we've gotten through the abstract and I've boiled it down to what we're talking about, whether I've talked about it in this space or I've talked about it on my Twitter, which is called X now, or I've talked about it in public at work, or I've talked about it among friends, or I've talked about it on Facebook, or wherever I've talked about it, whenever the idea of the terrorist or the mass shooter, the person trying to do mass violence, the individual. At the individual level, what we're talking about is somebody who is deeply socially isolated, someone who's deeply alone. And when you're alone for long enough, you come to a point where you know that there will be an end and that you will not be remembered when that end comes. And so the human impulse, and the impulse that the liberal is taking advantage of right now, is to understand at a very early age that death is coming for you, and the only way to evade death and to find immortality is to leave a legacy. And so until about the 1980s, until second wave feminism, and I can't prove that, but I will someday be able to prove that, because I've noticed the pattern, but that doesn't mean that I could write a scholarly paper like this, or that I could sit down and I could actually talk about it for 2 hours in a meaningful way. Because the kind of things that I say, I realize that I need stronger evidence than just saying them. And I should just talk about it now because I'm thinking about it, and this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to put this article, which is meaty. We're going to get into it, on hold. But the reason that people do mass violence, the reason that people do terrorism, the reason that people become religious fundamentalists and religious extremists as such, is out of a deep loneliness and out of a desire to leave a legacy. Okay. There was something else that I wanted to say there. I'm going to try to edit this one. I'm going to try to treat this with respect. And the reason I'm going to try to treat it with respect is because I spend a lot of my time, and I shouldn't talk about this in this episode. I should do a 2-hour episode about this. So like, comment, subscribe. I said this in the wrong order. Like, subscribe, comment to tell me what you want to hear me talk about when I leave something unfinished, because I leave a lot of these topics unfinished. And I need you for that. I don't need you for the income. If income is coming, it will come on its own. That's what the magic says. What I need from you is I need help to make this make sense to people that aren't you. Because if you're asking questions, it's making a little bit of sense. And that means that you're also an idiosyncratic person who's probably lonely. And what I'm trying to say is that I listen to a lot of the social commentary that's available to us on YouTube and on our social media platforms, and all of it is wrong. But it's not wrong on its face unless you're extremely well educated. And by educated, I mean read. I really do mean that you have to read a lot. You have to listen to a lot of educated and people who consider themselves intellectuals speak. And you have to be paying attention. And so when I was railing in my first episode against the woke worldview, you'll start to hear it now. Intelligent, educated people telling you that the woke worldview, like Nate the lawyer, I heard him say this week, that the woke worldview is a claim to being awake and that everyone else is asleep and that they have secret knowledge. I got into an argument with a Christian on X last week about how Christianity is in fact a claim to secret knowledge. He was trying to tell me that the Gnostics were bad and were heretical because they made a claim to secret knowledge that Christianity didn't have. But the fact of the matter is that they made a claim to secret knowledge that Orthodox Christianity couldn't support. Because if their claim to secret knowledge was true, then Orthodox Christianity was only the antechamber to the temple as such. It was only the first step. Like, what's the big platform step when you come into a house that has stairs that lead up to the house? That's what Christianity was in the first century. So if the 4th century really, but if the Gnostics were right, that's all Christianity was. But that's all Christianity is what I was trying to tell him. It's not that the Gnostics were right, it's that Christianity needs you, the user of Christianity, to remain in the antechamber, because religion as it had been done by the time of the Christians, and I'm talking about liberals now, and I am talking about conservatives, I am talking about the way your government is run, I'm talking about the way that your job is managed, I'm talking about the way everything is handled now as religion because of second wave feminism and the 1920s. Those are different things, but they were two hammer blows, effectively, like nails hammering into a coffin, that sealed us into this fate. And so what I'm trying to say is that I've listened to a lot of people talk, and a lot of people, the videos on YouTube are either 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 29 minutes, or 59 minutes and 59 seconds. And I've talked to you about why, and people don't believe me about why. And the reason is psychology. I talk to my partner frequently, and she wants to say, well, it's Sesame Street. Sesame Street had 7-minute segments, so you only pay attention for maybe a minute or 2 minutes or whatever, however long the segment is keeping your attention, and then it goes to commercial, and then we're conditioned to 23-second commercials. And then, that's what makes TikTok so perfect, and that's why YouTube for so long leaned into the shorts so hard for the creators, telling the creators make shorts, make shorts, make shorts, just like they were telling the creators make posts, make posts, make posts. This is where your money comes from. This is how we're going to give you money. Well, they're not telling you, the end user, but the only way that that YouTubers actually make money is to have you watch their videos for a long time. So, like Neebs Gaming are genius in their supercuts, because it's the supercuts that actually make them money, because it's not the watching the video all the way through. It's watching the video twice. It's clicking back in and continuing to watch that actually gets YouTubers put out on the front pages. But they don't want you to know that, because if YouTubers actually tell you how this works in a transparent way, they're asking you to make them money, and they're going to lose subscribers. Every time a YouTuber does that to me, I click right out. So I understand if what you think I'm trying to do is teach you how to make me money, but I'm not. I'm telling you why I'm insisting on 2 hours. 2 hours is double the length of my peers. If you want to feel vindicated for listening to me, what you want to feel vindicated in is having the time, the attention span, and the intellect required to focus, even if it takes you 7 visits, on a 2-hour discussion about a topic that people only want to talk about for 10, 20, or 59 minutes and 59 seconds. And frankly, I've talked about this before, if you click into Movie Bob, if you click into the Greens, I think it's Hank is the one with cancer. I know that's not the nice way to say it, but whatever. He's started to manipulate his audience to make him rich off his cancer. He's even making a movie about cancer. I mean, he's trying to demagogue on cancer out of a desire to leave a legacy that's perfectly natural and normal. But I have no interest. And I can tell that you, the general audience of YouTube, have no interest, because the reason that videos have gotten so specific in their lengths is because you have generally no interest. What you have is the desire to freely volunteer your time and your energy to a person that you believe is better than a corporation. And the problem becomes that those people that we support, and I love them all, become 7 or 9 or 10 or 20 minute advertisements for corporations. I'm sure that if you don't have YouTube Premium, you don't watch my videos because you don't want to deal with an ad every 3 minutes in the middle of my shit, thinking that you're enriching my life by giving me 3-minute ads. But in fact, you're not enriching me. Those ads don't come to me. I'm not monetized. I have no plans to monetize. I'll monetize when my community tells me that they want me to monetize. I have no interest in making money off of this. And the reason I have no interest in making money off of this is circling back around to what we're talking about. It's the Orphic egg. There was a cult of Orpheus, and the idea was that there was a snake wrapped around an egg. There's this image. And I can maybe, if I'm feeling clever, I'll flash it up on the screen for you. And the idea was that you, as a thinking person, have one of 2, maybe 3 choices, but really it boils down to 2 choices are what's usually taken. You can hatch your egg and you can raise the chicken or the animal inside it, probably a snake, and the idea of snake being not wisdom but knowledge, gnosis, the secret knowledge. It's a secret, a snake, the image of the serpent in the garden, in fact, is a claim to secret knowledge that the person interacting with the serpent does not have. So if in the Orphic symbol you are the serpent, that means that you have a claim to secret knowledge. It doesn't mean you have secret knowledge. It means you have a claim to secret knowledge, and that you can argue and make a claim and insist upon, but it does not mean you have in fact secret knowledge. The only way to know whether you have secret knowledge is to either crack that egg open and eat it and get the secret knowledge, in the same way that, you know, we make fun of what we used to call savage tribes for their blood rituals, where you eat the flesh of something or drink the blood of something that you want to assume its power. In the same way, you crack open your Orphic egg and you eat the yolk, and you get your secret claim, or you wait and you hatch it and you raise the chicken to give you or the serpent in this case to give you more eggs to then raise and hatch. And these are legacy. This is legacy, is what I'm talking about. And so what I'm telling you is that there's also the third way, and the second that I gave you, the hatching it and raising more, is actually not the common. That's the right-hand path. That's the good way of doing it. But the commonest way is to actually just sell your egg outright. Is to just sell your egg outright. Since the advent of what's it called when you're a capitalist? Capitalism. Since the advent of capitalism, and especially up until the Great Depression, and really up until the New Deal. I don't know what we call that after that, but after the New Deal, the idea became to sell your egg. I mean, the 1980s are all about sell your egg, sell your egg, sell your egg. If you look at this, third wave feminism is all about sell your egg. Look at OnlyFans. Just, that's what it is. It's just, if you got it, sell it. Sell it, because you're not going to have it forever. And see, that's why OnlyFans is actually doing so well, is because it turns out that women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s actually do have eggs worth selling, especially if they didn't sell them in their 20s or before they began, at whatever age they began selling their egg, their erotic Orphic egg. And so let's get back to this article, because I've now demonstrated to you my idiosyncratic thinking, if you haven't been with me before, and I've wandered off track for 7 minutes, and that's how long I'm allowed to have your attention. So let's get back to the article. This is, now, if you've never read a scholarly article before, the abstract is telling you what is in the article, and then the article is going to prove it. So what the abstract is, the claim to secret knowledge. It's a claim to secret knowledge, and then the body itself is the proof of the claim to secret knowledge. And so they're making a claim here of having secret knowledge themselves, having and secret knowledge is experiential knowledge. It's something that you have seen, and then in the Gnostic sense and the religious mystical sense, it's knowledge that you can't prove, but which is true. And what they're saying is that they've both experienced it, it is true, and they can prove it. That's what science is. And so let's read their proof, because they're right. But let's read their proof, and let's see if anywhere in their proof their math is wrong. Because I think that I started reading this, and maybe I felt vindicated in what I told you that I was going to try to do. If you've listened to my vindication episode, and if you haven't, I'm telling you what I said. I need to chase vindication. What you want is for me to feel vindicated. You don't want to hear about how I'm sad. I am. You don't want to hear about how my pelvis is wrecked. It is. And you don't want to hear about how my cat is dying of cancer and it's breaking my heart every single day. You don't. So let's talk about this article. Quote, "Humans have a fundamental need to belong and connect socially." This is a link to an article from Baumeister and Leary. I believe that's dated 1995. We're not going to read that. It just means that it's been shown. When this need to belong is not met, there can be devastating consequences. It is well established that loneliness, i.e., the distressing feeling that often accompanies subjective perceptions of social disconnection, has detrimental effects on the well-being of individuals, including an increased risk of mortality that persists even after controlling for comorbidities. And then that is proved by an article by Holt-Lundstadt et al., dated 2010, and then again Schenker et al., 2011. Moving on to the next paragraph, quote, I'm not going to be doing a very good job of my end quotes. I make fun of things that I see that don't do a good job of ending their quotes. They just move on, leaving you to wonder where the quote ended, and I'm not doing a very good job, and I can tell I'm not going to do a very good job. Feeling understood by other people is one critical factor for achieving social connection. Rees et al., 2017. And is associated with greater life satisfaction. Loon et al., 2008. Rees et al., 2017. More positive evaluations of interactions with strangers. Cross et al., 2000. And increased fulfillment in close relationships. I'm going to Oishi et al., 2010. Now I'm going to end quote. Now I'm going to read that back without the interruptions. Feeling understood by other people is one critical factor for achieving social connection and is associated with greater life satisfaction, more positive evaluations of interactions with strangers, and increased fulfillment in close relationships. What that means is, if even one of you understands my idiosyncrasies in a way that I feel is meaningful, I'm going to more positively evaluate my interactions with strangers. That means I'm going to be less of a dickhead on social media, and I'm going to find increased fulfillment in close relationships, which means I'm going to enjoy being around my partner and my pets more. It also means that I'm going to be less sad in general. I'm going to see greater satisfaction in my life. Moving on, quote, in one study, feeling understood activated brain regions that are associated with reward processing, whereas not feeling understood activated brain regions that are associated with negative affect. Morelli et al., 2013, end quote. And that only makes sense. Saying something, especially if it's an idiosyncratic thought that belongs in your own mind and you've never said out loud, and somebody going, yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and then repeating it back to you in a way that you've never heard, is like cocaine. It's amazing. Quote, self-report data also suggests that there is an association between loneliness and not feeling understood by other individuals. I believe that's pronounced Rutasalo et al., 2006. Such findings suggest that not feeling understood by other people may be a risk factor for loneliness. However, it is unknown whether lonely people actually see the world in ways that are dissimilar to others in their community, parenthetical, rather than e.g. exaggerating how dissimilar others' views are to their own, close parenthetical, which may contribute to feelings of disconnection due to a lack of shared understanding. Continue quote. We used neuroimaging to test the hypothesis that lonely, there's a one there, but I'm not going to go to the, I don't remember what those are called, because I'm not a scholar, the post something. People have neural responses, I'm gonna read that again. We use neuroimaging to test the hypothesis that lonely people have neural responses to naturalistic stimuli, parenthetical, specifically videos, close parenthetical, that are idiosyncratic in comparison to those of their peers, open parenthetical, including other lonely people, close parenthetical, perhaps contributing to the lack of feeling understood that often accompanies loneliness. I'm going to read that again because I call this talking to myself because of this sentence. So we're going to start again. The authors, used neuroimaging to test the hypothesis that lonely people have neural responses to naturalistic stimuli, specifically videos, that are idiosyncratic in comparison to those of their peers, including other lonely people, perhaps contributing to the lack of feeling understood that often accompanies loneliness. End quote, mid-paragraph. I want to talk about that. That's exactly what I was talking about in my, what's it called when you go on a tangent? In my tangent is that when I watch these big YouTubers that are making a lot of money talking about things that I'm interested in and that I know a lot about, and they're wrong broadly, specifically, but not generally, in such a way that they look right but are wrong, I have this loneliness response where I feel like, am I the only person that sees that they're wrong? And the answer is yes, because of the nature, nurture, responses that I have developed over the course of my life, because of my environment, because of my parents, and because of the other people that I have been around, and because of my own internal environment that I've created for myself, and my own habituated responses to my naturalistic stimuli, I have become idiosyncratic enough that yes, when I ask the question, am I the only person that sees this? The answer is yes. I am the only person that sees it in that way. And so, yes, it requires 2 hours for me to explain why. In the same way that this article required an abstract that says, hey, here's this question, here's the answer, and here's this many times longer proof with much greater depth. So we're going to continue. I do feel vindicated. This article agrees with me, and this article is telling me, and the reason that I have held on to the idea that I need to read this article to you for a week, I read it last week, but didn't read it, is because it is speaking to me. And so I need to explain to you how I perform Oracle, because Oracle is extremely important in the human milieu. It's extremely important to the human behavior. It's extremely important to living, is being able to Oracle. But we're going to continue in the middle of this paragraph with this article after quoting, measuring brain responses during a naturalistic paradigm in which people view audio-visual stimuli that unfold over time provides a window into individuals' unconstrained thought processes as they develop and evolve. Sankusare et al., 2011. Additionally, examining the similarity of neural responses can simultaneously capture various types of processing similarity, including similarities in high-level interpretations and understanding. Wen et al., 2019. Yeshurun et al., 2017, 2021. I've read both of those articles independently of this, and I'm actually going to end quote there, and I'm going to start over because I did not read that sentence well, and I'd like to read it again. Additionally, examining the similarity of neural responses can simultaneously capture various types of processing similarity, including similarities in high-level interpretations and understanding, affective processing, that's Newman-Ma et al., 2012, and patterns of attention allocation, e.g. mind wandering versus paying attention, Song et al., 2021. That explains why, end quote, sorry, I'm end quoting on a semicolon actually, but I'm going to read this whole paragraph again. This is dense shit, and we have to go through line by line and explain what all of this means. This line here, patterns of attention allocation, e.g. mind wandering versus paying attention by Song et al. From 2021, explains why Jordan Peterson has been banging that gong so fucking loud the last 2 years, because he was surprised that even he couldn't maintain his attention for over 7 minutes. And if I'm not wrong, that Song et al. From 2021 is about how our brains can't maintain attention without training for more than 7 minutes at a time, and how our brains refresh themselves every 15 minutes, which are things that I've talked about. Maybe not on the pod, but I talk about them frequently with the people in my life, whether you come into my life through social media or you're stuck here. So we're going to start that series of clauses over again mid-paragraph. We're going to break this down. Quote, measuring brain responses during a naturalistic paradigm in which people view audio-visual stimuli that unfold over time provides a window into individuals' unconstrained thought processes as they develop and evolve. That's what I was talking about that's what I was explaining during the abstract when I said that we can't know exactly what you're thinking. We can't know what's going on inside your brain. We can't measure the words. We can't measure the images. We can't measure the emotions, but we can measure the brain regions and by measuring the brain regions frequently enough, we can get an idea about what those brain regions are doing. Moving on. And as your thoughts develop and evolve, makes me wonder how long this study was applied to these students. Continuing, quote, additionally, examining the similarity of neural responses can simultaneously capture various types of processing similarity, including similarities in high-level interpretations and understanding, affective processing, and patterns of attention allocation, e.g. mind wandering versus paying attention. That's a semicolon. We're end quoting there. What they're saying is that by examining these similarities, examining how the regions of the brain typically respond to stimuli, we can compare them, and we can see through therapy if we have them talk through what they're watching, and we can get into their idiosyncrasy through therapy. We can start to compare similarities in high-level interpretation and understanding is what that means. That's how you do that, by having a quote-unquote normal person interpret their understanding of what's going on, or speak out through therapy while you're measuring their brain activity, and then a so-called lonely person with their idiosyncratic thinking. And you can begin with enough studies, and we began studying this in 2019, so 5 years of studies, you can begin to compare them. Your affective processing is like your emotional state. Your affect is like how you present yourself, if I'm not misunderstanding that. Tell me if I'm wrong, commenters, please. And patterns of attention allocation, mind wandering versus paying attention. You can start to compare what's going on in the brains of people when their minds are wandering, and then you can start to understand what's going on in the mind of a lonely person when their mind wanders. Why does their mind wander? Why do they get disinterested in what's going on around them? What videos make them start to wander their mind? And is their mind wandering because for emotional reasons, to protect themselves from the emotional or maybe even the obsessive thought response that happens, which is why I'm not doing what I plan to do, which is a series of commentary videos where I do exactly what I'm doing now, but I tear apart in a loving way people whom I follow, but their work has become a cracked open Orphic egg. Actually, it's not even that. A lot of them, their work is they sold their egg, and now they don't have anything Orphic or wise about them. They're just a serpent now. They're just making a claim to secret knowledge with no egg to back it up. So let's move on from this semicolon, because there's only two more clauses. No, there's only one more clause after the semicolon. Let's begin at the beginning of the sentence. All of those things, so let's say the various types, the similarities in high-level interpretations and understanding, the affective processing, the patterns of attention allocation, are aspects of stimuli to which people attend, end quote. That's the end of that sentence. And now we're going to move to the next sentence. That is attenuated, the aspects of stimuli to which people attend. That's actually from a paper, Lanikowski et al. From 2014. Moving on from that very difficult paragraph for me to move past. Quote, accordingly, the extent to which an individual exhibits similar neural responses to their peers can provide insight into the extent to which they process the world in a way that is similar to their peers. End quote. I'm going to read that again because I don't know that I understood what I read. Accordingly, the extent to which an individual exhibits similar neural responses to their peers can provide insight into the extent to which they process the world in a way that is similar to their peers. So what they're saying is that by doing these studies, they can actually see how different they are. Moving forward to the next paragraph, quote, Much work that uses intersubject correlations, ISCs, of neural responses. Intersubject correlations are what we've been talking about, similarities or dissimilarities between subjects. Continuing, quote, of neural responses has looked at whether and where similarities in behavior, interpretive frames, and expectations or traits are associated with similarities in neural responding. That's Wynn et al. 2019, also Yeshurun et al. 2017. Other approaches have calculated ISCs, that is, intersubject correlations, to examine how people's overall levels of particular traits or symptoms relate to their level of attunement with others. That's from Bolus et al. 2017. Accordingly, we tested the following hypothesis. Non-lonely people are all alike, but every lonely individual processes the world in their own idiosyncratic way. We're going to read that sentence again. Accordingly, we tested the following hypothesis. This is what they think might be true, having read all of their research data, but not having opened their experiment. Non-lonely people are all alike, but every lonely individual processes the world in their own idiosyncratic way. End quote. Moving forward from this study, if they're not trying to prove that wrong, they're not doing science. Quote, in other words, we tested whether the associations between loneliness and neural responses to naturalistic stimuli follow an, quote, Anna Karenina principle, end quote. This principle, is that called a subquote, Anna Karenina principle, subquote? This principle is inspired by the opening line from the novel Anna Karenina, subquote. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way, subquote. Tolstoy, 1997. Really? Tolstoy wrote in the 90s? That's wildly disappointing that it's so bad. Quote, it purposes that successful endeavors are marked by similar characteristics, but that unsuccessful endeavors are each different in their own idiosyncratic way. Diamond, 1997. Studying various phenomena in light of this principle has yielded a variety of meaningful insights. Diamond, 1997. Finn et al., 2018. In the present study, we tested whether individuals who are not lonely are exceptionally similar to each other in how they process the world, whereas lonely individuals each process the world in their own distinct way. So they're testing both clauses of the hypothesis, whether individuals do in fact test the world in their own way, and whether lonely individuals do see the world all in the same way but interpret it in their own way, and whether they actually do in fact interpret or process it in their own way. Moving forward, quote, we focused on subjective social isolation, i.e. individuals' perceptions or feelings of isolation, but objective social isolation has also been linked to myriad negative health outcomes, Schenker et al. 2011. Objective social isolation is often measured by obtaining information about an individual's self-reported social network size. I believe that name is pronounced Muini and Eisenberger, 2020. Although objective and subjective social isolation are associated with each other, they are distinct constructs. Muini and Eisenberger, 2020. Rutasalo et al. 2006. And some evidence suggests that subjective feelings of social isolation, that's hard for me to say, social isolation are linked more strongly than objective social isolation to negative health outcomes. Holwerda et al. 2014. I want to repeat that sentence. And some evidence suggests that subjective feelings of social isolation are linked more strongly than objective social isolation to negative health outcomes. Feeling lonely makes you more likely to kill yourself than being lonely. To disentangle people's perceptions of their objective levels of social connection or disconnection from their subjective feelings of social connection and or disconnection, we conducted additional analyses that account for objective social isolation by controlling for the number of friends i.e. out-degree centrality, I don't know what that means, that individuals reported having in their communities. This approach allowed us to test whether individuals who experience high levels of loneliness have neural responses that are dissimilar to those of their peers and to each other, even after controlling for their objective numbers of social ties. In other words, we tested whether lonely individuals process the world idiosyncratically, even if they have many friends. End quote. That's very important that they did that, because even when I've had lots of friends, people would call me an introvert because you have to ask me to come out many times before I'm willing to come out. Not because I'm introverted, but because I'm lonely and I think that your invite is just a token invite. You're inviting everyone. You don't actually want me, and I'd rather stew in my loneliness. That's how I used to be. I might still be that way. I haven't had the opportunity. No one has invited me to anything in a very long time. Okay. So now there's a statement of loneliness here no, there's not. There's a statement of relevance here in the middle of the piece, which again is what I find myself having to do about every 7 minutes of these is repeating why what I'm saying is relevant. So here's their statement of relevance. I'm just going to read the whole thing. Quote, loneliness, i.e. the distressing feeling that often accompanies subjective perceptions of social disconnection, which is pervasive and consequential, can have devastating consequences on both mental and physical well-being. I should not say that I'm not commenting on the prose. Prior work suggests that lonely individuals self-report not feeling understood by other people. Given the importance of feeling understood and achieving social connection, the feeling of not being understood by other individuals may be one feature that characterizes loneliness. What contributes to such feelings in lonely individuals? In this study, we use neuroimaging to show that lonely individuals process the world in idiosyncratic ways that are exceptionally dissimilar to their peers. Such idiosyncratic neural processing may contribute to feelings of disconnection from a lack of shared understanding. Our findings elucidate the underlying processes that characterize loneliness. End quote. I wish that they had switched up their that's with whiches. I really do. But it's interesting that they keep having to state their abstract so frequently. Continuing. Method. Functional MRI study participants. Quote, a total of 70 individuals from 2 residential communities participated in our neuroimaging study. I'm so glad they didn't say 70 participants participated like they did in the justification there. Anyway, which consisted of a functional MRI session and self-report questionnaires. See Figure 1. I might put the figures on the screen if I feel like it. They're not important for our purposes. We selected 2 residential communities to obtain a sample size in line with those in other neuroimaging studies which similar paradigms that relate neural similarity to behavior traits. Finn et al. 2018, Wynn et al. 2019, Parkinson et al. 2018. I know I've read Wynn. I've probably read Finn. Quote, we finished collecting data after scanning all interested members of these communities. The participants in our study consisted of first-year students at a large public university, that is, University of California, Los Angeles, in the United States. We excluded 4 participants from the functional MRI data because 2 of them had excessive movement in more than half of the scan, 1 participant fell asleep during half of the scan, and 1 participant did not complete the scan. End quote. I want to say something real quick. This choice of University of California in Los Angeles is actually a really good choice. That's a school and a state that has a lot of out-of-towners. It has a lot of people who are homesick, and homesick people are likely to be lonelies. So they were very, very likely in that school to find people willing to participate in, like, a loneliness study. So continuing on, quote, this resulted in a total of 66 participants, 41 of them female, not irrelevant, between the ages of 18 and 21 years. The mean age is 18.23 years. I think that SD stands for standard deviation of 0.63 that we included in our primary analyses of the relationship between ISCs and loneliness. ISCs are, I'm going to have to do this every time. Yep, can't remember. Of these subjects, one participant had excessive head movement in one of the 4 runs, and one participant reported falling asleep in one of the 4 runs. We excluded the respective runs of these participants and included only the remaining 3 runs for these participants in analyses that involved brain data. All participants provided informed consent in accordance with the procedures of the Institutional Review Board of the University of California, Los Angeles. We reported on separate analyses of the same data set and other articles to investigate associations between neural similarities and A, aspects of individuals' positions in their social networks, Beck et al. 2020, and B, personality similarity, Matz et al. 2022. In the present study, we investigated associations between neural similarity and individuals' subjective feelings of social disconnection. Okay, so like, end quote. Reading this, it does not say so like in there, but I need to get better at end quoting before I do that. They're repeating themselves a lot. So if you're bored, I'm also bored. So I'm not gonna read you about the functional MRI procedure because you and I don't care. We're not going to characterize subjective and objective social disconnection. I basically, I've read enough on this that I know that they have good measures now for gauging whether someone seeking therapy is actually lonely, is actually isolated, or is in fact a narcissist who's making it up. We're not going to talk about how they got their data from the functional MRI. Neither of us cares about that. We don't care about cortical parcellation. I would like to know about their inter-subject correlations. That's an ISC, right? Inter-subject correlation. Okay. Quote. Nope, don't quote yet. I haven't put my can of do yet. Okay. Quote. We extracted pre-processed time series data and I hate this word. Concatenated. I'm not going to define that for you. I don't know what it means either. They concatenated all 4 runs into a sync. You know what? I can easily define it. Give me just a second. Concatenate, link. Oh, fuck you, man. Link things together in a chain or series. So we extracted pre-processed time series data and linked it together in a series. Linked all 4 runs together in a series into a single time series for each participant, except for the participants for whom we used only partial data. Obviously. Continuing to quote, sorry. For these 2 participants, we concatenated their 3 usable runs into a single time series and calculated ISCs for these participants by comparing their data with the corresponding 3 runs and the other participants. We averaged the response time series across the voxels within each of the 214 brain regions for each participant at each repetition time. I don't know what that means. You don't need to either. Our main analyses included 66 participants, so there were 2,144 unique dyads in these analyses. 2144 is a magic number. That's not irrelevant to me. I should have been quoted there. 2144 is a magic number. It adds up to 11, which is 2. That's interesting. Quote, our analyses that included out-degree centrality as a control variable had 63 participants, so there were 1,952 unique dyads for these analyses. For each unique dyad, we calculated the Pearson correlation, I don't know what that is, you don't need to either, that might even be Pearson, between the mean time series of the neural response in each of the 214 brain regions. We then took Fisher Z transforms of the Pearson. Don't need to know any of this, so I'm just leaving it out. Okay, now we're moving on to relating ISC with loneliness. Quote, we took the following steps to test for associations between loneliness and neural similarity in each of the 214 brain regions. Skipping. You don't need to know any of this. This is all jargony horse shit that I don't know either. Lots of equations. Okay, so moving on to the next. The next section is relating ISC with loneliness while controlling for overall levels of objective social disconnection, friendships between participants, and demographic similarities. This is how they're blinding and stuff. Quote, we fit additional models to test whether any observed associations between loneliness and ISCs remain significant even after controlling for participants, plural, self-reported levels of objective social disconnection, whether the individuals in a dyad were friends, because prior research suggests that friends have larger ISCs than non-friends. That's from Hyon et al. 2020, Parkinson et al. 2018. And dyadic similarities in all available demographic variables. For details about how we calculated these variables, see the supplemental material. To do this, we fit linear mixed effects models. You don't need the math. Okay, let's just get into the results. Associations between binarized loneliness and neural similarity. Quote, we first tested whether loneliness is associated with more idiosyncratic brain activity than one's peers. The loneliness scores in our data range from a minimum of 8 to a maximum of 27, with a possible minimum of 8 and a possible maximum of 32, with a mean of 15.91 and a median of 16, a mode of 16, and a standard deviation of 4.879. I don't know why they put standard deviation, the definition of SD, earlier in the paragraph or earlier in the piece and not here. I said that wrong. I don't know why they put standard deviation not here and not earlier is what I mean. Anyway, our median split approach identified 35 individuals who had a loneliness score above the median and 31 individuals who had a loneliness score at or below the median. So, very nearly an even half split. For a plot of the distribution of the loneliness scores, see figure S1 in the supplemental material. I may or may not put that up. To relate the dyad level neural similarity measure with loneliness, we then transform the individual level binarized loneliness measure into a dyad level variable. Skipping. Neither of us cares about this stuff. I want to know. I read this all before, but I don't want to know how they tested. I want to know what they got, right? So I'm gonna do some being impatient. Oh shit. Okay, this is also shorter than I thought it would be. So let's get to here we go. Last paragraph before the discussion. Quote, given recent findings that link neural similarity with popularity, Beck et al. 2022, their own author, by the way, found that, we also fit models that control for participants in degree centrality, i.e. the number of times that participants were nominated as a friend by others in their social network. Kind of what I was talking about with the, you have to like get me to come. You got to tell me like the number of times you nominate me. Nominate me as the guy that you want to be there, not just somebody that you're inviting because you're inviting everybody. I'm going to read that again. Quote, given recent findings that link neural similarity with popularity, we also fit models that control for participants in degree centrality, i.e. the number of times that participants were nominated as a friend by others in their social network. The results of these analyses in the supplemental material the results of these analyses, see figure S3 in the supplemental material, are similar to those of our main analyses. Yeah, so it's kind of what I wanted to come here talking about. It's kind of what I've talked about throughout. It's this social media thing, popularity. You get likes, you get reposts, you get all of the love, the comments, the shares, the subs, the comeback. When people see you thinking like them. And so where I struggle is that because I'm so different, people don't see me thinking like them. What they see is me telling them that the way that they think is wrong and that the way that we're similar, they're wrong. And in like what I was talking about with that Christian, I'm obviously interested in Christianity and in religion and in spirituality and in the definitions of things. And this Christian is also interested in that thing, and when I tell them that they're broadly wrong about everything and try to teach them, I'm telling them that they have to start over with me as master. And in the same way that when I told, I don't remember what channel it was now, it's like somebody's beard or something like that. Anyway, another channel, I was like, oh, you're just ripping off Esoterica now. You're just plagiarizing Esoterica. And this person was like, what? Prove it. Why? I like Esoterica. I like this. What's wrong? I thought that they were challenging me in my personal knowledge, but what they were doing was panicking and going, wait, well, if I think like these people and they're wrong, help me. And so, yeah, I was meant to be peer review. What I asked them is, who am I? Peer review? Fuck off. We're not friends just because we have common interests. Well, this is telling me, quote, given recent findings that link neural similarity with popularity, end quote, yeah, having similar interests does automatically make you friends. That's how it works. I need to make a whole episode on making friends as an adult. I really do. I need to write a whole fucking book about it. Because nobody knows. Nobody knows how to make friends. Nobody learned how to make friends as kids. It's just something that happens as kids. You're not taught. You don't have to learn. It's just something that happens. And then all of your friends abandon you because you weren't actually friends. You were just in proximity. You didn't actually share interests. They all group up by the popular people, right? They group up around the popular people, the people who say the things that they think, or at least who say and appear to think the things that they want to be seen thinking, seen as thinking, right? And then you're left lonely. And that's why you're listening to me going, why don't I have friends? I've known my whole life why I don't have friends. I'm too fucking different. My parents hit me long after it was in vogue to hit kids. So I was different. So let's get into the discussion of this thing. Let's break it apart. Discussion. Quote, our results suggest that lonely people process the world idiosyncratically, which may contribute to the reduced sense of being understood that often accompanies loneliness. In other words, we found that non-lonely individuals were very similar to each other in their neural responses, whereas lonely individuals were remarkably dissimilar to each other and to their non-lonely peers. Our results remained significant even after controlling for individuals' objective levels of social connection and or disconnection, specifically their numbers of friends, demographic variables, and friendships between participants. Therefore, we conclude that lonely people may view the world in a way that is different from their peers. These findings raise the possibility that being surrounded predominantly by people who view the world differently from oneself may be a risk factor for loneliness, even if one socializes regularly with them. And what they're saying here, end quote, what they mean is that people who view the world differently, people who surround themselves with people who view the world differently than them, are at an extremely elevated risk of doing violence, either to themselves or their surroundings. Continuing, quote, brain areas in which responses were more similar include the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, precuneus, ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, superior temporal sulcus, superior parietal lobule, inferior parietal lobule, and nucleus accumbens. That means, end quote, what that means is that there are a lot of areas of the brain that are being activated when you are thinking as a lonely person. Quote, notably, in many of these regions, in particular those that belong to the default mode network, similar neural responding when watching videos has been associated with similarities in understanding and interpretation of narratives. Which is, end quote. Also, that's Fenn et al. 2018, Wen et al. 2019, Yeshurun et al. 2017. Interpretation of narratives and the interpretation of friendships, that was found in Parkinson et al. 2018. I'm going to read that again and then I'm going to explain. Notably, in many of these regions, in particular those that belong to the default mode network, Similar neural responding when watching videos has been associated with similarities in understanding and interpretation of narratives and friendship. End quote. What that is, that sentence right there, is exactly why I did a hate play of Sea of Stars. Because what we've begun to do, and why during my hate play of Sea of Stars, watch it, don't listen to me talk about it, I talk a lot about bad review. I talk a lot about how Yahtzee is shit at what he does, how the IGN Game Informer escapist types are all dog shit, and I talk a lot about how the game is dog shit because the game knew that it could get away with its popularity, that people would like it because it's dog shit. It would be popular because it doesn't try to make you think anything. It just gives you things that you already like. And so what I would like to do is reread this sentence while you're thinking about how you've been nostalgia baited into buying things you don't like even though they're things that you already like. Quote, notably in many of those regions, in particular those brain regions which belong to the default mode network, similar neural responding when watching videos has been associated with similarities in understanding and interpretation of narratives and friendship. This is why we go to people like Movie Bob to tell us whether a movie is good. This is why we go to the people that are much, I can't say enough, much is worse than Movie Bob to tell us what we should take from our movie narratives. This is why we spend so many hours listening to video essays about the video games that we like. This is why we watch Let's Plays. This is why we need our friends to share our videos. They're not our friends if they don't share what we've produced. They're not. This is why you see it on Reddit. If you go through Reddit, and I need to talk about my Oracle, but what I do to get prepared for my day is I go through all of the different social media platforms that I can handle, and that means X and YouTube and Reddit. And if you just scroll through what Reddit makes available to you on its front page, like our texts, if you read these R texts, a lot of what women are getting mad at men for is not sharing their pictures on Instagram and Twitter and whatever. Not sharing what they do. And I know that my dissatisfaction over my adult life has been that women take absolutely no interest in what I'm doing when they want to say that they're romantically interested in me. But liking and sharing and telling people that aren't your friends about what your friends are doing is friendship. If you aren't doing that for anyone, you are no one's friend. And I don't mean me. I don't mean to virtue signal by liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing to my work to say, well, you're someone's friend. What I mean to do is challenge you to be anyone's friend in your immediate environment. Like, as easy as texting is, if when you wake up, you don't spend 5 minutes to send a text to everyone that's important to you, every single person that's important to you, you don't have anyone that's important to you. You are a narcissistic psychopath. And the reason I can say this, and I can say it with such extreme confidence, is because every media has been invented so that we can tell the people that are important to us every single day that they're important to us. Mail was invented so we could tell the people that we loved what was going on in our lives. And writing letters is exactly the same tradition as picking up the phone to call your mom. It's exactly the same tradition as texting your best friend, hey bud, love you today. It's the same. It's exactly the same. So let's move on. Quote, we found that this pattern remains similar even after controlling for objective social connection and or disconnection, demographic similarities, and friendships between participants. Have I started at the wrong spot? Consequently, our results suggest that lonely individuals process the world in a way that is dissimilar to their peers and to each other. Future work can further test this possibility by using behavioral experimentation and semantic analyses to examine what aspects of lonely individuals' interpretations are particularly idiosyncratic, end quote. What that means is that 3 scans, 3 series of videos, and 3 what is it called when you go to therapy? 3 therapy sessions isn't enough to know the degree of idiosyncrasy. It's just enough to indicate a statistical presence of idiosyncrasy. Moving on. Quote, although it is unclear whether the observed idiosyncratic processing in lonely individuals is a cause or a result of loneliness, the associated lack of shared understanding may lead to challenges in achieving social connections. These effects hold even after controlling for the number of friends of individuals and whether 2 individuals in a dyad are friends with each other, suggesting that our findings are not merely a consequence of lonely people being less likely to have friends or non-lonely individuals being more likely to be friends with each other. End quote. The reason they're wondering whether lonely people are more likely to be friends with themselves is because they're trying to ask whether loneliness is autism. Because what they found is that autistic people are significantly more likely to get along with one another. And so people who have CPTSD that manifests like that's complex personality. PTSD is what is PTSD? It's trauma. Holy shit. Post-traumatic. Holy shit. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So people with CPTSD tend to manifest autism spectrum traits. And so what they're wondering is whether loneliness isn't autism, and they're wondering whether loneliness isn't a CPTSD response, and they're wondering if the 2 things aren't the same brain activity. Whether autism doesn't develop like these mothers that think, well, my kid was fine one day and then my kid was not fine the next day. Whether autism and loneliness are a habituation of intelligent people who are left to their own thoughts and aren't taught to communicate, because that's what autism is. It's a lack of education in communicating, and in a lot of ways that's what CPTSD is it's a lack of education and properly communicating. And so if you want to know a little bit of something about me, I grew up in an extremely violent, extremely nonverbal home. I didn't really talk. I didn't really talk to anyone until the love of my life left me. And then it became, well, I have to talk to everyone. And the only things that I could say, I mean, I had girls tell me all the time, did nothing good ever happen to you? And it's like, right, this is why I don't talk. Because nothing good ever happened to me. And it's like the good things that did happen to me are bad stories. They're sad stories. They're tragic because they were good and then they were really bad. Like my Vader. She has been the bright spot in my life this last 5 years, and she has cancer, and I'm going to lose her. I was inevitably going to lose her because she's a cat. But I mean, cancer is not a fun way to lose someone you love. Right? And so now I've gone and upset myself. I've triggered my PTSD by talking about this at all, and by talking it all. But I wouldn't have been communicative at all. And so what I did is the people that I talked to in school, I can very clearly remember kindergarten through 4th grade. When I was in the public elementary, kindergarten through 3rd grade, when I was in public elementary, I went to not a charter school, but they were called magnet schools in 4th grade. And then my life took a fucking dirt nap at 5th grade. But when I was in the public school between kindergarten and 3rd grade, I remember the people that I would talk to the most were the people in speech therapy. I would talk to them about how they were taught to speak, because it's very clear to me when I try to read, but I most certainly would have a speech impediment if I didn't practice how I would definitely lisp, and I would definitely stutter for sure. I stumble over my tongue all the time. And it would be significantly worse if I hadn't taught myself how to speak by talking to the kids in speech therapy, because nobody knew that I would have a stutter, nobody knew that I had any kind of speech impediment, because I didn't talk. And anyway, it was probably something that you had to pay for, and there was just no way my parents were doing that. So I would like to because I don't remember exactly what I broke away from and why I broke away from it, I'd like to trigger myself by reading that sentence again. Quote, "It is also likely that the extent of objective and subjective social connections and or disconnection fluctuates with time, which may in turn influence or be influenced by the extent to which an individual..." Oh, goodness. There they come, the stress burps. I'm so sorry. "Which may in turn influence or be influenced by the extent to which an individual processes the world and idiosyncratically. Future work that implements a longitudinal design may further elucidate the causal directions of these relationships. Furthermore, in our study, we focused on subjective feelings of social disconnection and thus on individual self-reported perceptions of social disconnection. Future work that complements self-reported measures of social disconnection with measures of relevant affective and behavioral phenomena, e.g., based on structured interviews or on the reports of peer or family members, may further enrich our understanding of these phenomena. In our study, we collected the data for characterizing subjective and objective social connection and or disconnection during 2 different time periods. The gap occurred during a particularly important transitional period in individuals, that's plural, lives, specifically participants' first few months at a university. Like I suggested, that would be the greatest, that would be the easiest way to find these people. Continuing quote, "We obtained the functional MRI data and the loneliness measures between September and November, whereas we corrected the social network survey data in December and January. Although the time gap between the two data collections was small, future work that tests the relationships between neural similarity, subjective social connection and or disconnection, and objective social connection and or disconnection measures that are obtained simultaneously and or in different social contexts can enrich our understanding of how these variables interact and change with time. Additionally, our study sample consisted of university students who were young adults, specifically between ages 18 and 21 years, and roughly 2/3 of our participants were female. Future work on the relationships between loneliness and neural similarity and in non-university communities can help elucidate how much the relationships that we observed in the present study generalize to other populations and social contexts." I'm going to end quote right there because I want to back up a little bit to what they were saying here. When they're telling you and they're reminding you that they only did young adults, they only did college students in their first few, they only did freshmen for the most part, or they only did transfer students, only young people between 18 and 20 years, and the vast majority, nearly 2/3 of them, were female. And when they're reminding you of that, and then they're following that by saying that we need to do other populations and social contexts, what they mean is they are self-selecting for highly intelligent people. So if what they're trying to select for is whether this is an autism or a CPTSD response, they can't test that with the group that they have, because the group of people that they have, that is college students, especially transfers, are more likely to be either autistic or have CPTSD, because highly performing people in academics, or people who are likely to seek out high performance in academics, again, high intelligence seems to be either a response to CPTSD, and that's probably wrong. It's probably that the extreme intelligence causes the CPTSD, and what I mean by that is that the environment, the parents, the children around you do violence to you or cause trauma to you because of your extreme intelligence. I can tell you right now that I was called pube teeth every day of freshman year of high school because I was highly intelligent, and that was threatening to my male peers. Because if there's one thing that a 14-year-old girl is interested in, it's a transfer student who's also highly intelligent and nonverbal. Because that's someone who's not likely to call you a slut. Not that I got a lot of action. I think we talked about this. I accidentally kissed the girl that everybody thought was a slut, which I never understood, because she'd never had a boyfriend before. But I didn't know what was going on. I had just moved to that town. I didn't know anybody there. I knew one person there, and he left me in the lurch as hard as anyone possibly could. So when I tell you that I know what it is to not have friends and to be completely socially isolated, I went to high school in a town that hated my parents, hated my grandparents, hated my family. They were absolutely in no hurry to educate me so that I could have a good life. They were in a hurry to educate the other kids that went to that school. They looked at me as someone who was naturally intelligent, was going to do fine, even if they tried to tank my life, and they did try to tank my life, and I would have done fine if I had real friends. But the relevance of the 2/3 female is because females, when they get violent, they do self-harm. They cut, they sever social connections. They do things to undermine their social connections. They get into porn. They do behavior that's considered slutty. They drink. They self-harm. Girls self-harm. Boys with CPTSD will also self-destruct, do self-harm. There's a particular response to CPTSD that is self-harming, that is just whenever you get into a traumatic or a stressful situation, harming yourself in whatever way. And I'm sure that YouTube is going to hate this, and maybe I need to put up a warning, but saying self-harm behavior can mean anything from walking a mile to work every single day on a torn pelvis, to dating people that you know are bad for you. I mean, borderline personality disorder is a thing, and it's typified by self-harming behaviors. So I'm not saying anything that, and I'm most certainly not encouraging anyone to do anything. If reading this is encouraging you to be a friend to someone, because what this has shown is that being a friend to someone who is lonely, if you're lonely, helps alleviate your loneliness, and that lonely people can form a dyad of self-help. And so when you read all these self-help Twitter and self-help Instagram and self-help Reddit and self-help books, and you read all this shit, it's telling you to be an island, and no person is an island. Some people are dyads, but it does take a village. It doesn't just take a village to raise a child. It takes a village to be civilized. It just does. So moving on with the quote, or moving on with the paper. Quote, "Our findings dovetail with recent suggestions that the default mode network is a sense-making network that combines external information about an individual's environment with existing internal information of their past memories and knowledge." Yesherin et al., 2021. And findings that suggest that loneliness is associated with structural and functional differences in the default mode network, Sprang et al., 2020. End quote. So again, what they're trying to do is they're trying to wonder whether CPTSD causes structural damage to the brain, structural changes to the brain, and they're trying to wonder whether this isn't autism. Quote, "For instance, loneliness has been associated with greater variation in gray matter volume in the default mode network, suggesting that there is greater idiosyncrasy in the structure of the default mode network in lonely individuals than in non-lonely individuals." End quote. "From context, I'm beginning to think that the default mode network is the part of your brain that handles your autonomous thinking. It's your habituated behaviors." Quote, "We found that lonely individuals have idiosyncratic functional brain responses to audio-visual stimuli in regions of the default mode network, whereas non-lonely individuals were exceptionally similar to one another. Our findings thereby add further insight into the idiosyncrasies of the default mode network that may characterize lonely individuals. What types of idiosyncratic thought processes characterize lonely individuals? Prior research offers some clues about what thought processes may potentially lead to idiosyncrasies in neural responses in lonely individuals. In our study, lonely individuals had smaller ISCs in subcortical regions, such as the left nucleus accumbens, that constitute part of the brain's reward system, Knudsen et al., 2001, and in regions of the lateral posterior parietal cortex that are associated with bottom-up and top-down orienting of attention. Corbetta and Schulman, 2002. End quote. I want to revisit that. So what they're saying is that lonely individuals were less likely to think like their peers and parts of the left side of the brain, which is where you do logic, that's where you talk to yourself, and in the reward center of the brain, but also in the part of the brain that's associated with bottom up and top down orienting of attention. That is the part of your brain that organizes what you're thinking about. So what they're suggesting right there, without saying it, is that lonely people tend to get distracted thinking about their thoughts. They tend to be obsessive thinkers. What that means is that lonely people can't just do a task, and that task could be having social interaction, and then think positively about the social interaction, about the task. They don't get rewarded for the task. They get rewarded for feeling like somebody understands the manner in which they do the task. And what that is teaching children not to get the correct answer, but to be creative in how they give the answer. That is exactly what I told you when I hypothesized at the beginning that this is a result of 1980s education. And the educating teachers, how to teach teachers, what are those called when they're a great lecture? The great lectures courses, great courses lecture, there we go, said that is what we did circa 1980, and that's where we're at now, is teach the child not to come to the correct answer, but to come to a creative answer and to be creative in giving their answer. And that is teaching children to think idiosyncratically. And the reason that you had so many girls, so many females take this study and be objectively lonely is because girls specifically for hundreds of years have been taught to think creatively, not to get the correct answer. That is first wave feminism. That is Simone de Beauvoir. That's what she's telling you in her book. She's straight up telling you that men and the way that men think, by coming to the same conclusions independently and then testing them against one another, is bad. That you should in fact think creatively, and you should come to wildly different answers than everyone else. If you come to wildly different answers than everyone else, you're more likely to be right. And that is fucking false. It's just fucking false. So feminism, from the woman who gave fucking cruel birth to it, has just done harm. And look, no feminist, when she says I'm a feminist, also takes the Hippocratic Oath. But no worldview, no philosophy can stand on its own legs if it is a narcissistic psychopath. If it is doing harm, it cannot be righteous. Quote, therefore, one possibility is that lonely individuals do not find value in the same aspects of situations or scenes as their peers, and instead focus on other aspects of situations in an idiosyncratic fashion. End quote on a comma. That is exactly what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that I watch these videos and I read the comments and I'm the only person going, no one else sees that this is facile trash? He didn't say anything. She spent 2 hours shitting on Bob, but all she says is that he wrote a cliche trash book. He'll tell you he wrote a cliche trash book. You're not teaching me anything. I'm not learning anything from listening to you. But so why are you talking? But it's because of my loneliness. Right? It's because of my idiosyncrasy. It's because I've had time to sit and think and think and think and think and think about what I'm thinking and think about what I'm thinking and think about what I'm thinking. I recently explained it to my partner that I'm playing multiple games of chess at the same time when I'm thinking. When I'm talking to you, when I'm talking to you on an individual level, if we're having a conversation, I'm playing what you are going to say out against what you've said in the past 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 moves ahead of you. I'm playing chess with what you're going to say. And if you don't start saying different things than what I think you're going to say, I lose interest entirely and I get lonely because you don't think differently enough from how I think you're going to think and how you thought in the past. You become boring to me. And having a friend, or the person that I find being boring, being friendly, doing the things that friends do, being a friend, makes there a certain satisfaction with their being boring. Because it means that I'm different, but it's okay. Someone likes my difference, even though I'm the only person like me. So I'm going to read that again. Therefore, one possibility is that individuals do not find value in the same aspects of situations or scenes as their peers. End quote. That's exactly what I told you when I said that we just do not get rewarded in our brains in the same way. The reason that we're lonely is because we don't find the job, we don't find the task, we don't find the social interaction, we don't find the movie, we don't find the YouTube video likable in the same way as the other people. And we look at their popularity, the person getting all these likes, and it's exactly what I tweeted with my first tweet when I made my new account, because my other one was unjustly banned. I still haven't gotten a reason why I was banned, but it's exactly what I said. Lonely people we doom scroll through these social media looking for someone who said something we agreed with that doesn't have any likes, it doesn't have any retweets, none of that, so that we can say, oh, they think like us and they're not popular, we could be friends. Quote, this may result in a reinforcing feedback loop. That's what I told you from the abstract. This may result in a reinforcing feedback loop in which lonely individuals perceive themselves to be different from their peers. End quote, on a comma. It's the perception that you're different. We all know we're different. We all know that we're not the same. But it's the perception of sameness that makes us comfortable. That ends most anxiety. That's why people are religious. That's why people join a political party. That's why people are liberal. That's why people dye their hair green. It's not to be different. In fact, it's to be the same. It's exactly what drove the Unabomber insane, was being told over and over and over and over in an unkind and unfriendly way by a professor that all of his ideas were derivative. They were all young, and he was just being different to be different. And in that way, he was being nonconformist. He was conforming to nonconformity. He was being nonconformist in an effort to conform. And it's exactly what I remember the 90s being. I did a whole podcast about the 90s and labels and the rejection. I've done whole episodes on millennial rejectionism, right? This idea that we reject things because they're popular, but we don't actually do it. We just have this idea. We label fucking everything now, and it's a millennial push because the people that we grew up watching said not to, and so we rejected them and did it. So moving back. Quote, this may result in a reinforcing feedback loop in which lonely individuals perceive themselves to be different from their peers, which may in turn lead to further changes in achieving social connection. The more I tell you you're wrong, the less we're going to be able to connect. But the more I tell you that you're right, the more you feel stupid for not knowing why you're right. Quote, in one recent study, Courtney and Meyer, 2020, greater loneliness was associated with reduced neural representational similarity between oneself and other people in the medial prefrontal cortex. End quote. This is exactly what I was talking about in my representation podcast, right? Being lonely means that you represent yourself inside yourself incorrectly. You see yourself, you represent yourself to you, you show yourself you badly, and then you can't see how people see you. So you're playing a game of chess where you're always the fucking loser as a lonely person. Starting over. Greater loneliness was associated, quote, greater loneliness was associated with reduced neural representational similarity between oneself and other people in the medial prefrontal cortex. suggesting that lonely individuals think of themselves in a way that is more dissimilar to others than is the case for non-lonely individuals, end quote. End quote. The prefrontal cortex is where we do all of our high-level thinking and planning. In fact, the prefrontal cortex is when I tell you that there's a moment before every choice that you make that you can make a different choice. That's where that happens, is in the prefrontal cortex. Quote, exceptional dissimilarities between lonely individuals and their peers in how they process the world may contribute to an overall sense of lacking shared understanding that often accompanies loneliness. In summary, our findings suggest that processing the world differently from people around oneself is linked to loneliness. These findings were reflected in lonely individuals' idiosyncratic neural responses in brain regions that have been associated with shared interpretations of events, attentional orientation, and reward processing. Moreover, these effects remain significant even after controlling for objective social disconnection and friendships between individuals. Therefore, being surrounded by people who view the world differently from oneself may be a risk factor for loneliness, even if one socializes regularly with them. End quote, end article. Their acknowledgements here are: we thank Elena Sternlicht, Kelly Shue, and UCLA Center for Cognitive Neuroscience, especially Jared Gilbert, for providing support with data collection. Their ORCID IDs are Eliza C. Beck and Carolyn Parkinson. The footnotes are what those are called. I couldn't remember. And then let's look at the transparency. Action editor, Daniela Schiller. Editor, Patricia J. Bauer. Author contributions, Eliza C. Beck. Conceptualization, data curation, formal analysis, investigation, methodology, visualization, writing, original draft, writing, review, and editing. Ryan Hyen. That's a terrible name, sir. I'm so sorry for you. Conceptualization, investigation, methodology, writing, review, and editing. Karina Lopez. Investigation, project administration, writing, review, and editing. Meng Du. Conceptualization, data curation, methodology, writing, review, and editing. Mason A. Porter. Conceptualization, funding acquisition, supervision, writing, review, and editing. Carolyn Parkinson. Conceptualization, funding acquisition, methodology, supervision, writing, review, and editing. And then here are all of the references. I'm not going to go through them. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what their credits are. I know that Ms. I don't know which of those is actually appropriate. I could never figure it out. They all sounded the same to me when I was a kid, and I was never allowed to ask questions. Whenever it was like, wait, I don't understand, teachers would be like, well, too bad, moving on. That always happened to me. So yeah, I am vindicated. I am doing this talking to myself. I am talking to myself because my thoughts are idiosyncratic and I have no one else to talk to them with about. I have no one else to talk them out with. So I have to do it here because the only way that I can actually measure, like they're doing, how my thoughts morph and change over time and what I actually think and what I actually thought isn't to remember it anymore. Because of my head trauma, I don't trust that I'm going to remember how I felt as a kid and how I feel now in 10 years. So I have to start getting a log of this down. And so if they're studying people in their, 18 to 21, here I am, a 36-year-old man who has dealt with and thought about and understood my loneliness in a very real way since I was a very, very small boy. My memories are of managing my loneliness. So maybe they can learn something, and maybe you can learn something about how to be a better friend. Because when you tell your loved ones that you love them, and then you don't write them just to tell them that you love them, and you don't share your internal monologue with them, and you don't tell them what's going on in your life, and you don't check up on them when they tell you what's going on in their life, and I don't mean birthdays and Christmas. I mean, when you tell somebody that you have an MRI on Monday, when somebody tells you that they have an MRI on Monday, you fucking text. You say, hey, how'd your MRI go? You don't do it the day after. You don't do it in the next week. You're not so busy. You're not a CEO. You're not so busy. And fuck you, CEOs can find the time. God damn, I've listened to enough podcasts that interview CEOs and how they are who they are, and it's through their personal connections and their friendships. You're no one without your friends. Aristotle said that first, and he was right the first time. You're no one without your friends. You can't get a job without a real friend. Without a real friend, it's impossible, and it's been that way for over 100 years. It's always been that way. Always. I'm wrapping up. I might let this one run short. I'm wrapping up. I read a book. I think it's called Death in the White City recently. I don't particularly like it. I don't think that Ted Larson and I are ever going to be friends. I think that's his name. The author, he doesn't tell me what I want to know. He tells me uninteresting things for the most part. And he leans too hard into the violence. It's about H.H. Holmes being parallel to the World Fair. And so he romanticizes the hyper-violence of Holmes killing these women. And I didn't appreciate how many words he spent romanticizing extreme violence. But why did I bring that up? How does the White City have anything to do with this? Well, the migrant workers and the unions, the union workers, of course. We're sitting here now, and our social commentary is all about how these writers at Hollywood are union striking, and how like they are somehow like a representative of the working class. But like the working class used to riot, and they used to strike, and they unionized for good reasons. For instance, H.H. Holmes, when he built his house, he used non-union contractors because he could fire them after they had done their gig without being paid first, and there was no recourse to making him pay them. That's not a thing that doesn't still exist. I follow and watch a few contractors on YouTube, and they're always like, if you're not making your people that you take contracts from pay up front, you're just guaranteeing that you're going to be in small claims court when you're done with your job. I know that from firsthand experience. My father was a business owner, and he did a multi-million-dollar job for Ingersoll Rand, and Ingersoll Rand said, you delivered that to us before we paid? We're not paying you for that. It cost them less than $1.2 million or whatever the contract was. It cost them less to run him around in circles until he was run out of money in court fees than paying him. And why shouldn't they? And so us leaning on the people that misrepresent our world to represent themselves as the working class, it's just a facile lie. And it's exactly what I've been talking about when I talk about my loneliness. If you are a writer in Hollywood, you are in the upper middle class. I don't care if you're doing it for commission, and I don't care if you're homeless. You are in the upper middle class. You have made a choice to work for the multinational corporation. You've made that choice. I've read Ellison. I can't think of his first name now. His book, Alice in Wonderland, which is kind of his memoirs. He was a writer for Star Trek, among other sci-fi properties and television shows. I believe he also worked on The Scary Door. That's not what that's called. Twilight Zone. And he'll tell you in his memoirs that Hollywood's trying to rip off the writers. The writers are the least important part of the production, but they're the part that thinks they're the most important. Ellison would tell you he thought he was the most important part of any writing project. And having played Sea of Stars and playing through Assassin's Creed 2 and having played any number of recent just terribly written games, movies, television shows, the writers are most certainly important, but having a veteran great writer and having a veteran director and a veteran production team is so much more important than having a good writer. You can make what I thought was absolute gold with absolute shit writing. I recently read Watchmen, and it is cliche trash. Even for 1985, it was cliche trash, which makes me think that the Dark Knight series of graphic novels is cliche trash, because Neil Gaiman is cliche trash. And I know that Neil Gaiman didn't write that. I know it was the other guy. I can't remember his name because I'm not a comic guy. But it's cliche trash. No wonder in the 90s comic books couldn't sell. It was all cliche trash. And had been. That's why it's the gold, the silver, in the 90s. Because the fucking 80s ruined everything. You sell your egg and all you've got left is the cliche. All you've got left is the cliche. And what a cliche is taking archetype and trope and using it in an uncreative way. And what cliche is what I'm talking about. Cliche is not being lonely. Cliche is the opposite of being lonely. Cliche is being so popular you don't know your ideas are shit. Cliche is Dunning-Kruger. Writers going on strike is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And while we've been talking about high-level psychology, we can talk about the Dunning. I feel like I can talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect like you know what the fuck that is, but I know you don't know what the fuck that is. The Dunning-Kruger effect answers why smart people are constantly doing dumb shit. And the reason is, the more you think you know, the more likely you are to overestimate what you actually know. Which is exactly what I was talking about when I was talking about the Orphic egg and the claim to knowledge. Having a claim to knowledge and having sold your egg leaves you with the feeling like you know something. Dunning-Kruger is the feeling that you know something. It's why surgeons don't wash their hands. It's how doctors cannot believe in the germ theory, right? It's like how can you be a doctor and not think that you're transferring germs from one injury to another when you're moving patients without washing your hands, without changing your equipment? What the fuck is that? And don't act like it's not a problem. People are dying all across this country the United States, because of fucking what's it called? Not scurvy. Is it the shingles? Because of fucking shingles and staph infections. That's doctors and their offices, the hospitals not being clean. How the fuck can it be 2023 and we still have this problem? Dunning-Kruger is the answer. The more you think you know, the more likely you are to overestimate what you do in fact know. And that's why we are where we are with feminism. That's what liberalism is. That's who Biden is. That's what Biden's administration is. And see, that's why I've actually grown after his presidency to respect Trump and maybe like him as a human individual. Because his whole fight right now against renewable electric resources, specifically wind, only makes sense. That motherfucker lost his pants trying to provide renewable electric, specifically wind energy to Ireland. Lost his pants, and that country fucking hates that guy because of wind energy. He knows that shit is a dead end. If anybody knows wind is a dead end, it's Donald Trump. I'm not here to tell you to vote for Donald Trump. If it were 2 years ago, I would be here to tell you to tune in, tune out, and tune in, turn on, and drop out of the entire representative Democratic race. But now I don't know. Now I think maybe voting is a good idea, even if you vote for somebody who's not one of the two. And maybe I think that you should just write in your own fucking name, even if nobody else writes in your name. Because the only way to protest it is to be counted protesting, and they know how many people can vote, and they know how many people do vote, but they don't know how many people that are not voting are doing it out of strike. So maybe on the next ballot, if you're not voting because you don't believe in the process, just write in on strike. Because when the fucking news is reporting that 1.2 billion people, or 1.2% of the population, or 7.5% of the population, or hell, the 15 or 16% that's needed to get one of these assholes that are an independent in front of the national audience at a debate, if 15% of people are showing up and saying, we're on strike, yeah, then you've got a problem. Then they have to listen to us. They have to respond to us. They have to care what we think. And lonely people talk. The one thing I learned when I was dating is that if you just talk about what's interesting to you, girls will have sex with you. It's just that when I was in my obsessed with UFO phase, all I did was talk about UFOs, and it got me laid every weekend. I didn't give a shit what they were into. I didn't even try to be interested in what they were interested in. I turned everything they said into a UFO conversation and into an opening to talk about how, oh, that's related to UFOs. And it got me laid, no questions asked. I didn't have to ask for it. They were asking me for it. So just lonely people, be interested in something and talk about it. Because unlonely people are deeply uninteresting. The reason that they're not lonely is because they don't have thoughts. They don't have thoughts. They don't think about anything deeply. And so when you look at all of these memes and you look at all of these people claiming to be introverts, you can't claim to be an introvert and have 10,000 likes on your YouTube channel. You're not an introvert. You're a lazy extrovert. In fact, you're not even lazy. You just know that you don't have to put any effort into making friends because you're already an extrovert. You're already popular. You're already like the douchebags of the Daily Mail and every single liberal saying things you know people already want to hear you say. But as a lonely person, you're thinking things that people don't want to hear said because they've never thought them before. They've never heard them said before. And so I'm going to tell you right now, there was a philosopher, I'm not going to bring up his name because I haven't read his work, who said the same thing. If you're lonely, fucking talk. You're going to get blocked. You're going to get banned from social media. You're going to be called mean, terrible names. You're going to be called a racist. You're going to be called a Nazi. You're going to be called homophobic. You're going to be called transphobic. You're going to be called all the worst things. But if you are lonely, speak. And if you have to do it by asking questions, then just ask the question. Ask the question. Just say why. And when you see people reacting to why like it's violence, you are not the problem. You are not the problem. If they react to your why, you saying, I don't understand why you're doing this, or I don't understand what this is. Why is it the way it is? And they give you a bad, especially a violent answer, give them your hypothesis. Make them fucking justify what they say. I was talking to somebody the other day about global warming. And they were talking about how the world is going to end and everybody's going to die. And I said, what you're doing is promoting genocide. And she said, what? And I said, you are promoting racially motivated genocide. You are being a white supremacist and a genocidal fuckhead. And she said, how is that possible? And I said, because the weather is not so bad that the world is going to end in the next 50 years. In fact, in 50 years, the weather is projected to be as warm as it was before the ice age that came with the Industrial Revolution. The two things happened at the same time. The people that are arguing against man-made global warming, it is man-made, but the people that are arguing against it are pointing out that we're exiting an ice age. The world goes through ice ages without us. It went into that ice age without us, and it was going to come out of that ice age without us. The only problem is that it was going to come out of that ice age 250 to 1,000 years later than it is without us. But that's only a problem if you're a classist, what do they call it? Elitist, racist, genocidal fuckhead. Because the only reason it's a problem that the world is getting warmer is because the population is blooming. The only reason it's a problem that the population is booming and the world is getting warmer is because parts of the world that couldn't feed themselves are now able to feed themselves. So whole groups of people that used to be slaves because they didn't have the natural resources necessary to feed themselves As I've talked about in the first 3 episodes, they were slaves. They are slaves. Your iPhone was made by a slave, and that person is a slave because their land isn't arable enough for them to grow the food necessary for them to feed their children so they can have autonomy. It's called food autonomy. It's the first step to actual independence. And the reason the United States is so obsessed with actual independence is because the North American colonies were the first place in the history of the world that had so much food abundance that they had food independence by accident. That's why we remember the Thanksgiving, the feast with the Native Americans who actually kept us alive that winter. And the reason that we remember that is because of our massive food surplus. Companies, that is, I said the word early, capitalists need you to believe that there is a scarcity. And so the people that run the world, the liberals who own all of the world's corporations and own all of the world's wealth, they need you, the individual listening to this, no matter your economic status, even if you are in that 1% of the world's wealthy, they need you to believe that there is food scarcity on this planet. And so they manufacture food scarcity on this planet so that they can splash it on the news networks that they own, so that they can tell you that you are okay for being fat. It's okay that you're fat. America is the best country in the world. Look at all the food that we produce. But the thing is, we don't produce the food that's made you fat. We produce the food that goes into your high fructose corn syrup, not the food that you DoorDash. That shit's all imported. Not all of it. I mean, you can't import your beef. But you may or may not understand what I'm saying. Actually, you might be able to import your beef. I bet if you look, Taco Bell doesn't even use beef grown in the States. They use beef that was grown in Mexico or Canada. I bet you that's a real thing. And the reason is because they get to count their profits twice. They believe that they get to count their profits twice. They believe that when they believe that by raising the price through import and by refining things outside the U.S. and then paying the tariff to move it, paying the tariffs to move it in the foreign country, and the tariff to move it into the United States, well, by raising that price to the end user, they are actually increasing their percent profit. But all they are doing, in fact, is forcing inflation. All they're doing is making everything more expensive. And I'm off the topic of loneliness. I suppose that what I've been doing is demonstrating my idiosyncrasy by and practicing what I preach and telling you to speak up. If people don't like what you say, it's because they're wrong. Or it's because you're so wrong it pisses them off. But you have to, if you're a lonely person, if you're out there and you don't understand why you don't have a significant other and why you don't have a group of friends that love you, and you don't understand why no one will subscribe to your channel and no one will like your social media posts, you have to be willing to be wrong. And what I have learned recently, and I'm going to have to do a whole podcast on it because I am at the I'm at the hour and 58 minute mark. But I have misunderstood humility wrong my whole life. I thought humility was staying silent when other people were making their mistakes. But humility is being willing to give advice. It's being willing to speak up. But also reserving that people are allowed to make their mistakes and reserving the right to be wrong. That's something that we as Americans do not do often enough. Reserve the right to be wrong. We don't know how to mea culpa. We don't know how to say I was wrong, my fault, my bad. and then we don't know how to improve. And this is what lonely people, this is what anxious people, this is why they are how they are. Because they want to improve, they want to be better, they want, in a lot of ways, they want to be different. And I'm here to tell you that if you're lonely, don't be different. Don't be different from how you are. If you're lonely, don't be different. Being different will make you seem like a fraud, and it'll only make things worse. Talk about what you like. Be interesting. Be interesting. I don't know that I can say that I've ever been interesting to another person, but I'm an idiosyncratic person, and I can say that when I listen back to my work, whether it be my Sea of Stars playthrough or whether it be these podcasts, I can say that I find myself interesting. I find these able to keep and maintain my attention, and if they can keep and maintain my attention, they can keep and maintain yours. I've always believed that. I used to say that when I was a manager at work. If I can do it, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it better, is what I used to say to managers, because I'm a fucking loser. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. But if I can see these things, you can see them. If I can see them, they're obvious. They're right there. And if you can see them, you can talk about them. You're allowed to talk about them. You don't have to scream and yell. You don't have to climb up on a high horse. Again, referencing Donkey on here. I love Video Game Donkey. What his most recent video on video game review. You don't have to scream and yell. You don't have to be angry. Even in my hate play, it took me almost 12 episodes to actually get angry enough to yell. I was just disappointed. Even in this, I'm speaking passionately, and I'm allowing my voice to be my voice, but I'm not yelling. I'm not losing my temper. You don't have to, this is the wrong way to say it, but you don't have to be histrionic. You don't have to be emotionally unstable to get attention. You don't have to be. Doing it is what babies do. And a person that screams and yells and throws a temper tantrum and makes a big emotional stink is a person who was taken out of their crib and was never allowed to develop into a toddler. When they would scream because they were lonely, they were attended to. So they don't know, if they're lonely and they're reacting the way they are, like people who talk about video games, if they're lonely, and they're not, they get too much positive feedback for what they're doing to actually be lonely. They're manufacturing the feeling of lonely, like I manufacture the feeling of righteous anger in order to sit down in front of this microphone. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be angry to speak. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be vindicated. You don't have to be righteous. All you have to do is be interested. Interested, not even interesting. You don't have to do it in an interesting way. If you're young, especially, you will learn to be interesting. It has taken me 36 years to figure out how to do this thing that I'm doing. And I am certain that I am not interesting to a 1.2 million person audience. But I'm interesting to me. And like I keep saying, if there's one person that likes to do it, there's one person that likes it done to them. And where there's one person, there's two. Where there's two, there's three. And where there's three, there's five. And where there's five, there's eight. And you can see the math. That's how it works. So if you don't want to be embarrassed for liking my shit, like, comment, and subscribe on my shit. That's what I'm saying. If you don't want to be embarrassed by me, tell me what embarrasses you about me. Tell the people that you want to share my work with what embarrasses me embarrasses you about me. I do that all the time. Like, I like this. It's not the best. It could be a lot better, but I like it. And that is usually not enough to get people to check it out. Because most people aren't your friend. Most people don't care what's going on inside your head. But I do. I do. Isn't that what the Patreon thing is? I've been giving myself a lot of anxiety about this, so let's talk about it. And what I'm finding is that the subscribe thing is an invitation to be a friend. that we as subscribers of YouTube channels want to be able to call the creator among our friends. I've had that feeling and that impulse. And Davey504, isn't that his name? He made his bones with his the ending of his videos pretending to be your friend, right? Not responding to comments, but pretending to be your friend. And Neebs made their bones in the early days with the commenting on comments when you got special kickbacks from YouTube for doing that, mentioning comments, right? And that's what Patreon is. That's why guys like Brandon Perna have the live stream, and that's why you can do the Discord or whatever. Is it's the illusion of friendship, right? Well, I'm a Cancer. I have an unlimited amount of friendship that I can give to the world, and in fact, that's why I keep getting fucking banned on Twitter. Is, God damn it, when you're somebody's friend, you challenge them to be their best version of themselves. And when you're already famous, you already got a following, the last thing you want is to be challenged to be better than you are again. Because the process of getting there, if there is initial caps, is a process of improvement and challenge and constant struggle to get better. And so when you get to the top, and we've talked about this when I talk about vindication, I talked about guys like Hainsworth. Albert Hainsworth is who I wanted to mention with the then Redskins. It's why people are throwing shade at Joe Burrow right now. It's why everybody throws shade at anybody in their workplace who gets a raise, right? And suddenly you want that raise to also come with greater effort and greater involvement and greater investment, right? But usually what happens is getting the raise is getting there. And what you don't want to do is continue to improve. This is why the big corporations for blue-collar workers require them as part of their ongoing employment to also seek ongoing adult education, not even in the field that they were hired in. What these mega corporations have figured out is that the people that make enough money to now be considered wealthy, right, to at least have financial independence, because food independence is the first thing and financial independence is the second thing to separate yourself from slavery. And so these people that make technically enough money to be financially independent, what you need them to be is financially dependent upon you. That's the whole point of being an employer, is to have people who are financially dependent upon you. That's why every employer underpays everyone. Every football player is underpaid. Even Mahomes, who is now, again, the highest paid player in the NFL, he could make 10 times what he's making and be underpaid from the profit margin that the league makes. But that's the point, is the profit margin. You have to keep wages low. In order to keep prices low, wages have to be low. That's the only way. That's the only consistent way to keep prices low and profits high, is to keep wages low. And the only consistent way to keep wages low is to keep shifts understaffed. And the only way to work a business with shifts understaffed is to have highly qualified people making too little money. It's the only way. The only way to fix that is not socialism. The only way to fix that is to take more investment at the individual level of your work, and to be better than you are today, and to commit to being better than you will be tomorrow for the rest of your life. That's the only way to break out of slavery. It's the only way. Self-improvement is the only way. And what loneliness teaches us is the only people who are lonely are people who know that they need to self-improve. That's exactly what Dunning-Kruger teaches us. People who think alike think badly. People who think for themselves and are trained and practiced to think well change the world. And so if what you're coming here for is the self-help necessary to figure out how you can change the world, because that's why you're attracted to liberals, and that's why you're frustrated with me for shitting on liberals so hard, is because the liberal promise is that you at the individual level can not just change your immediate environment through magic, but you can change the actual world. the perceived reality that everyone on the planet shares. Just read the, is it called The Diary or the Memoirs of an Economic Hitman? Just read that. The CIA got him to do abhorrent things in the 80s and the 90s because he believed at the individual level that he was capable of changing the actual world by lying about what the actual world was. And this is what electric cars and renewable resources is. This is what are. That's what they are. Because if you watch the congressional hearings where they talk about these things and the Republicans push back on the people who are saying that we can power the world with free electricity, right? Self-making electricity, and they push back. Well, all of their estimates are, well, maybe, or it could be, or they're not grounded in reality. And that's exactly how the CIA was able to manipulate the data through the 70s, 80s, and 90s necessary to control the entire world. Was by giving megacorporations terrible estimates, terrible and false estimates for profit margins, especially as regards electric power production in third world countries. Just giving them terrible estimates, completely unreal, like orders of magnitude out of sync with reality. And see, I was raised in manufacturing, and specifically I was raised in CNC manufacturing, where the tolerances are in the thousandths of millimeters. And so orders of magnitude out of tolerance is completely unacceptable to me as a human individual, and it should be completely unacceptable to anyone who understands how the pyramids were built and the accuracy of the tolerances. It's not that we couldn't build to the tolerances that the pyramid was built at. It's not that we can't build to the accuracy that the pyramids were built at. It's that we don't because we don't need to. It's not that we don't want to. The pyramids didn't need to be built at the tolerances that they were built at. That's why we marvel at them today. They were built at the tolerances that they were built at because they wanted to be. They, in fact, needed to be if people like What's-His-Face and Graham Hancock are right when they think that there are magically significant numbers that point to an event that ended a world civilization in our past. They have to be perfect. But because our building doesn't have magically significant numbers, the tolerances don't need to be perfect. They need to be good enough to withstand the immediate environment. We're not worried about building things that last anymore. We don't build buildings. Like, learning about Chicago in the 1890s was a little bit of a revelation to me. Like, we don't build like that anymore. And so, like, these people, I'm at 212, and so I shouldn't be talking about, I've been thinking a lot about transhumanism. I've been playing 13 Sentinels, I think it's called, maybe 16 Sentinels. And it's a warning about the prevalence of transhumanism in our culture. It's actually a brilliant critique of the narcissistic psychopathology that is required to believe in and want to further transhumanism, posthumanism. But those are words that you don't know, and I haven't defined, and it's 2 minutes and 13 seconds, 2 hours, 13 minutes, and 28 seconds into this thing. I don't need to be introducing another highly complex psychological, theological, and philosophical idea. I'm just concerned, honestly, I'm concerned that you, as a lonely person, have grabbed onto the ideas of Gnosticism and trans and posthumanism because those are traps for the lonely in the same way that jihad is a trap for the lonely. And so while I am telling you that you need to struggle with yourself, I am also telling you that being lonely is how you turn that struggle against the whole world. I was told by the one that I believe that the whole world is against me. I do not believe that the whole world is against me. I know that the whole world is against me, because I know that there's no one in this world that is trying to work cooperatively toward a healthy goal for the world. I know that everyone in the world, whether they're working cooperatively or they're working as an idiosyncratic lonely agent, is working toward their own individual goals. This is what socialism is. This is how Stalin became Stalin. This is civilization. And until we remember first century Christianity, and until we remember why there were claims to knowledge that had to be occulted in religion and couldn't be made public and couldn't be made secular, until we remember those things, we're all lost. All of us are lost. Each and every one of us is lost. So be a friend, and I'm here to tell you that if you want me to, I'll be yours. Thanks for listening. This has been Talking to Myself Gaming. I am talking to myself, and when I ended this last time, I said I was going to commit to doing this every day, and it's been like 10 days, so I'm not going to commit to my next one, but you'll hear from me again soon. Thank you very much. I think it's super cool that you made it this far.